Hey everyone, this is your host Yoshino, and you're listening to Artist Decoded. My guest today is director April Maxey, whose short film work premiered at this year's 2022 Sundance Film Festival. She is one of 8 directors who were chosen to be a part of AFI's directing workshop for women, and we talked about her experiences working with the team at AFI to develop her short film work. And let me read you April's statement for the short. In my work, I am often interested in exploring the innate feelings of loneliness we feel as humans and our longing for connection. I wanted to tell the story of this queer Latina who is at a crossroads in her life, searching for a way forward after a painful breakup. Often we feel like we lose a piece of our identity after a long-term relationship ends. And we can be left wondering who we are without the other person, without the life we had grown so comfortable in. In this story, I wanted to show what the journey of reclamation of self might look like through a queer Chicana sex worker lens. I believe that by telling stories from underrepresented perspectives, we challenge audiences' perceptions and we create space and validity for experiences which may differ from what is usually depicted in the mainstream. Inspired by personal experiences, it was important to me in this story to authentically depict the world of underground lap dance parties without a lens of judgment. I wanted to show dancing as a job, with ups and downs like any other, and to tell the story with nuance, without shame, and with characters that feel real and grounded. For Gabriella, going back to this job gives her a sense of control over her life again, as she is going back to a world she knows. However, it is when she is left in solitude that she is ultimately able to come to a deeper understanding of herself and where she is at. So that was April's statement for the short. Thank you all for tuning in. This is my conversation with April Maxey. I hope you all enjoy it. Okay, so thanks for coming in and doing the pod. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we had a really good phone call the other day, and I think, just for the audience, I want to be very clear with the objective of this interview. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually going to title it somewhere along the lines of the destigmatization of sex work.
Okay.
So I really like the film because it showed the humanity of Gabrielle's character, mm-hmm. and how a lot of the times I feel that people tend to go back to things that they already know, especially in times of confusion and uncertainty. But before we go into the film, I wanted to ask, how do you personally define sex work?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I want to say I'm not like the any sort of authority on sex work at all, other than, my own personal experience in that world. And like, I can only speak to that. But, and I know there's just like such a huge plethora of jobs that encompass the sex work industry. But as I understand it, sex work is defined as any job in the sex industry, which is like, can be anything from stripping or, pornography or escorting or, peep shows or, anything where you're basically selling sexuality, intimacy, like stuff like that. So yeah, wait, what was the question? How do I define it? I think,
how do you define it? How do you personally define it?
Yeah, I think that would be it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like in general, do you see things through a moral lens of right and wrong in that field? Or like, are there things that draw the line, or do you think it's completely individualized?
Yeah, I try to not place any moral judgment on it, and that's why I appreciate the word sex work, because it, is saying like, hey, this is a job, like it is work.
Yeah.
Just like any other job. And it's like, I think because it's so blatant in its participation in certain systems, it's easy to kind of for people to kind of like judge it. But it's like, there's plenty of other jobs that operate within patriarchy and capitalism and all of that. So it's like this. And at the end of the day, it's like, these are services that people are consenting for, like, and people are providing it, and it doesn't have to be this like negative bad thing, and it shouldn't be. There's just so much shame rooted around sex in our culture, and it's this very like, it's either like you have to be super pure, or it's like, oh, you're hypersexual and stuff. And it's like, really, we all kind of exist in this, or I mean, at least I do it, right? It's like, I'm intimate and I am a sexual person, and I'm also not, and I also like do a bunch of other things. And yeah, I'm kind of rambling. I forgot what the question was now.
No, that's okay. I was saying, do you see sex work through a moral lens of right and wrong?
Yeah. So I think that's like what I liked about telling this story, is that I'm really just not trying to place any judgment on the character. I'm really just trying to transport you into her experience, and it's like, that is just a given. Like, she's going to this job and it's a given. She's not approaching it from this place of naivety, and she doesn't know what it is and all of that. It's like, and then when you're introduced into the world, like, these women are dancing, and I casted a lot of real dancers in the film as well. And it's like, they have agency over their sexuality, and they're, powerful, and they're working, and they're good at their jobs. And, it's just a given, and it's not a question. And that's kind of the way I approach the sexuality of the character too. It's just like, okay, everyone's gay in this film. Like, and it's not a question, and there's no like debating around it. Like, there's no discovering of sexuality. Like we are in a gay, we're following a lesbian like lab dancer. You're just thrown into her headspace. So yeah.
Yeah. So so I found it really interesting. I mean, just speaking about that lens of capitalism and patriarchy, and there was a moment in the film where Gabriella's stage name is Liliana. And so there was that moment between her and her client where they were talking about marriage and him getting a divorce, and she was saying, well, marriage is a social construct anyways. And he was like, well, yeah, I guess. And through, I could imagine through this male character's patriarchal lens that he would potentially see it as otherwise. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is actually, let me get some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I actually don't see that conversation they're having as being particularly gendered. And like, one of the things I was trying to do in that little moment, which also is not a moment that's like necessarily pushing the story forward. It's not necessary. We thought about cutting it, but it's like, there is just something that I like about this moment, because I think it fills out the world more. And it's like a very specific detail of like part of what this job is, which is, when you're not actually providing this like sexuality, you're providing more of like an emotional intimacy, almost like a therapy, like a little dosage of therapy session. and both parties are willingly participating in that. And I think that there's these moments within that where people are being their full selves and they're having an authentic conversation. And I think that both of those characters are being honest in their opinions about the matter. And yeah, like I wasn't necessarily trying to use that scene as like, oh, well, he's a man and so this is his perspective. I think he is a character that is heartbroken and going through this divorce and is sad about it, that it didn't work out, because he buys in to the idea of like marriage being based in love and hoping that it'll work forever. And then Gabriella's character is like bitter and petty and just saw her ex with her new hot girlfriend earlier. She's like, fuck all that, like that shit's fake. and so I'm like, these are both like where these characters honestly are at in this moment, and they're able to like have this exchange. And maybe they'll be at different places in a year from now or a few months from now and feel differently about love or marriage or whatever. But yeah, I wanted to show that it's like there are these slices of like, because she doesn't get anything by like pretending to be, someone else, or like it's much easier actually to just be yourself. Aside from the fact that like, no one knows she's a lesbian in that world. But yeah. But I like that you pointed out that scene, because people have it's a very polarizing scene, I find, actually. Some people really don't like it and some people love it.
Huh. Well, okay, so that's interesting. So let's go a little deeper into that. What have you found that people like about that scene, that clothing seam? What do you find that people like about that scene, and what do you find that people don't like about it in general?
Yeah, so I think there's one kind of party of people that's like that doesn't have the patience to the character's name is Herbert, who's very well played by Kenzo Lee. So some people are like, I don't care about this man and his divorce, and like, why do we care, And then there's another party of people that do care, and they find it to be like a moment that is, has like a layer, like this bit of humanity to it, and that it shows this other part of the job, which is equally as important in its value of the service of like this emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
Which I thought was important to show, because I think that is so much of what it is in a lot of, I just don't think we see it portrayed a whole lot. And it's not even, I think it's easy to place judgment and be like, like, fuck these men, and like, I don't know, but it's like that's it's like she is being herself in that moment, and it like he's a nice guy, and he'll pay her after that, and then see her next week or whatever, and like there's nothing wrong with that. And I think some people are just like, I don't care about him, but I'm like, well, but then some people really do. So yeah.
Well, first of all, let me just make a remark on that. Never trust an Asian man named Herbert.
Oh my God.
I can say that because I'm Asian as well. No, no, I'm just kidding. But
oh my God, wait, is there something about that name? Because I was like trying to find a name for him for a long time.
Oh no, I'm literally just being an idiot and just making a joke. I have no qualms. Anyone out there that's listening to this podcast that's named Herbert and that's Asian, I'm very sorry for.
We're sorry.
I'm very sorry for degrading your name in that way. But I think it's what's interesting too is just like I don't know if this is necessarily like a human psychological truth, but we all have these certain projections, right? Some people are more conscious about it than others, but we have our past experiences, and like Gabriella's character in this, and I thought it was really funny that, she was leaving that message to her ex-girlfriend's new girlfriend, and then you cut it right at that scene when she's like, when she's about to go off.
Yeah.
But I think that, so we go into situations with viewing artwork, and we have these certain projections, and we have certain projections and experiences, right? And experiences, they are also survival mechanisms too, right? Because you can be in a bad situation, and then, that same situation may come up, and in a way, that elicits like a fear response. So then you react in a certain way, right? And I think with viewing things, right, and even thinking about the idea of sex work, like some people are okay with that idea, and some people are definitely not, right? And so I think just, it's interesting when like scenes like that between Gabriella and Herbert like elicit such a strong response in people, because you can see it from multiple vantage points. And like, I was watching the masterclass recently with Amy Tan. Do you know Amy Tan? She's a writer. She wrote the Joy Luck Club.
Oh, okay.
And she was talking about how you should always try to find compassion for your characters. So in that way, it's like not demonizing people, right? And then so you can have more, you can see the humanity in what people go through and why they make decisions, right?
Yeah.
And so, I thought about that when I saw that film, or when I saw your film and that specific scene. And it also just is kind of like a slice of life that can say a lot about a lot of various things,
Yeah. Okay. Like two little other thoughts about the Herbert scene. Is one, another interesting thing was that, like I think that the actor at that time, like a lot of that scene was improvised, which is something that I really like to do with actors. And
I like that.
Yeah, he was a great actor. I think he also teaches acting classes and stuff. And he was like also going through like a breakup at the time. And like, he was kind of like improvising off of that. And like, before we filmed, he was like, oh, what if I say something like this? And I was like, yeah, like I really like that, and so I think that goes to what you're saying with what Amy Tan was saying, is just allowing this moment to show kind of like a look at someone, even if it's like a very small glimpse of their humanity, and we're not just like, oh, this is a bad guy, or this is like the asshole client, or this guy is boring, or whatever. It's like, and I think within this sort of like Hollywood structure that, everyone's supposed to be learning and stuff, it's hard to have well, I think that's the trick, right? Is like, how can you have a smaller character that feels real and grounded? Because it's like in screenwriting books, it would be like, well, every scene is supposed to have a purpose, and every character is supposed to be, saying something about like this goal in this scene, and da 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 da. And that's what I was kind of saying about like how, that scene in particular, like, it's not really advancing the story. It's kind of like in the screenwriting books, they'd probably be like, you don't need this, like cut it out. But it's also like, I think an important part of building that world, and a detail specifically that people have commented on. So I think it's important to kind of not let all of these rules kind of dictate everything about your storytelling. If you have I don't know, just like a gut feeling about something and like why it should be there, you know?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, because that's what creates your own sensibilities as a filmmaker or as an artist, is understanding when the rules need to be followed, understanding when to break the rules. And I always think, like, at least in my perspective and as a photographer, you know, like you first begin photography and then you're understanding, depth of field. And then you're starting to, like, you know, put the cup on the table and take a photo of the cup. And then, you know, then you get that sort of like depth of field and you play with aperture and those sort of things. Right. But then after a while, you don't even think about that kind of stuff. You know, it's a technique, but you don't think about utilizing the technique to tell the story necessarily. Right. So it's like your voice becomes more individualized the more that you can utilize your instincts.
Yeah, like trust yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Like, just, I mean, because, you know, there's so much information out there and you could spend literally like your entire life trying to figure out how to make the perfect film, right? And there's all this information. You go masterclass, you can go to whatever, right? And at the end of the day, like, you can only do so much research, right?
Right. It almost becomes like a distraction from actually like writing, because you know, writing is actually, I find, kind of scary, you know. It's...
what parts? I'm really curious about your writing process, actually. So I was going to ask you a bunch of questions about that. But
yeah.
go on.
I find that I kind of have to, like, or maybe I heard this somewhere in a master class or something, who knows, like a talk, that someone was like, it's, you know, right. Oh, I remember. It's from this book that they made us read. Okay. Yeah. So this book we had to read for, the AFI directing workshop for women program I'm in. But anyway, so it's called A Director Prepares by Anne Bogart. And it's just like 7 essays. And it's not like so technical. It's more like, I guess, philosophical. And there's a chapter called Embarrassment. And it basically, like, she talks about, which I think is tied into vulnerability, but like, you know, if you're not a little embarrassed by the story you're telling or by what you're writing, like, you know, maybe you're not going deep enough. Like, and it's like almost like, you know, you should write from a place of, like, I trick myself by being like, okay, like, I'm just going to write this. Like, no one's ever going to see it. I don't need to show it to anyone. Like, this is just for me. Like, and I think when you kind of write like that, I don't know, you just get like some of the more raw, vulnerable parts of you and yourself and your experiences that, I don't know, like, I think that, like, make better stories, or maybe it's somehow stories that people connect with more, because then you're tapping into this like emotional truth that might be more, you know, relatable than you think it is.
Yeah. So how long have you been writing, and how did this occur with AFI to create this short film?
Yeah. So I've, you know, I went to Pratt Institute, and initially I was a graphic design major, because I always was like interested in fine art and like visual art and stuff. So I thought I wanted to be a graphic designer. And then my junior year, I just decided to change my major to film, because I was doing film classes on the side. And so I really loved film. I loved independent cinema. And part of that was that you had to write and direct and shoot your own short films. So I was just writing because I wanted to make a film. And so I needed to write the film. Like, no one else is going to write the film for me. And I write, I think I write stuff because I want to direct it. but I find writing very hard every time I do it. It's very, I don't know, like I said, it's kind of scary and vulnerable. And, some days I'll write like 15 pages and some days I'll write like one page. And there's just so much that goes into it. And I hopefully I like am getting better every time, but I don't know, would be hesitant to say I'm like a screenwriting expert or anything like that. Yeah, I'm very much just trying to get down on the page what's in my head, which is this like often emotional or intimate experience, and then just so I can direct it, but that middle part of getting it onto the page of what's in your head, and when other people read it that they get it, like that's, I don't know, that's really hard for me. And I think sometimes like people, when they read my script, I don't know if they're as moved or if they like it as much as like when they see the actual film, because I think writing is just really hard. But I'm like, what's in my head is good, I promise.
So I want to explore this with just writing in general. Do you also write short stories that are not for the screen? Do you write poems? Do you journal?
I definitely journal, but I don't. Yeah, I'm not like just out here like writing for fun, like it's like I'm journaling for my mental health and reflection and to learn or to remember or whatever, and then I'm like writing things I can direct. Yeah. I think Ava DuVernay was talking about how, writing is not her favorite part of the process either. But yeah, so for AFI, we had to write, we applied with a short film script, and I guess I had written for fun, right? A drama pilot of Work. So it was like a 60-page screenplay version. And so I was like, yeah, let me just turn this into a short that follows one character and use it to apply. And yeah, that's how that got developed. It went into the program, and then I basically had a really long time to develop it over the pandemic. And I kind of evolved the story a lot within that time, but it always followed a queer Latina who goes back to an old job as a lap dancer. So, yeah.
Yeah. And what was that process like?
For like writing and rewriting and stuff, or the program?
Yeah, I guess more so on the program. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that program is really great. It did end up being mostly virtual because of the pandemic, but I think one of the main things that's awesome about it is that you're working with a cohort of 8 other filmmakers, and so you get to know them and their stories very intimately, and like why they're telling this story and stuff. And it's like, we would have screenwriting sessions with like a screenwriting expert that would come in, and we would each get, I don't know, like a few hours with her, and everyone has read your script, and everyone's like asking questions or making suggestions or interpreting scenes differently, and you're kind of just getting this really nice supportive community of people who know your story intimately and what you're trying to say, and everyone's trying to help you get the script to the best place it can be, which is kind of a dream because, then you're also in this program and there's deadlines, and it's like, I think it can be very hard to do that. But yeah, it was a really amazing process, that whole program. And it's been around since like the 70s. I think Maya Angelou was like one of the early women who did that program. And a lot of great directors have gone through there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that I could imagine that being part of that collective of people was really helpful in being generative or generating these ideas, and to be able to like relay that is like invaluable, you know, and get focused opinions. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're all there for essentially the same reason with your various projects, but there's a certain camaraderie that that comes with that, I could imagine.
Yeah. And it's so cool because then you're, you know, seeing them make their projects and like seeing like everyone's like sharing rough cuts with each other. And it's just really nice to have kind of a community.
How long does that program last for?
So I think normally it's supposed to be 8 months or so, but with us, it's just the director jokes. She's like, I know y'all been in this program for 13 years because of the pandemic. It just made everything so long. It we started classes, I think in March of 2020. Oh my God. Wait, it was like right when the pandemic was happening.
And
was
you
that
were
2020?
living in Yeah.
Jesus,
it was 2020. Yeah. And you were living in New York at the time. Is that right?
When I applied, I lived in New York, and then I like had kind of been wanting to move to LA. In the program, you're required to shoot in LA. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna, for 8 months, you know, go into LA and get a sublet and, you know, taste the LA life a little bit. And then the pandemic happened. So then I was only in LA for a few months, and then I went back to New York. And then I like went through a whole breakup in the middle of the pandemic, and then I had to move, and you know, I had this really nice apartment in New York, and I lost that, and I was like, I'm not starting over again in New York. Like I've reached the height. That's it. And so I mean, it's so hard to find a good apartment at like affordable rent in New York that when you lose it, it's like, damn it.
It's pretty devastating, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Because you're locked in rent too, right? Like there's rent control.
Right. Yeah. We had like preferential rent. It was just, oh my God, it was, yeah. So then I was like, you know what? Maybe this is a sign that if I have to start over anyways, I might as well start over in LA. And yeah, I've been here a little over a year, and I really like it, and I've found community here, and like I love my home. I share it with one of my best friends, and so
yeah, that's great. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I do want to go back into some of the psychology that is embedded within what you were doing, you know, in terms of like when you were, I guess, dancing, right? Is that what you would call it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like I said at the beginning, like if I say anything that's a bit ignorant, please just forgive me. Yeah. So can you tell me like any, I don't know, a scenario or a story that happened with maybe any, I don't know, whatever you feel comfortable with, just like this kind of the psychology behind it. And maybe we can go into some more of the capitalism, patriarchy sort of topics.
Yeah. The psychology. Well, so what's interesting about this particular place? So they were called underground lap dance parties in New York, and it's interesting because I think people ended up working there. A lot of people who didn't necessarily know like what it was when they started, and I think that there was a fair amount of people that worked there that probably maybe had never had any other job in the sex industry before. So it was this weird, like they would advertise it as like non-professional strippers, like, oh,
Mm.
they're, people in college or whatever, like it's a girl next door, like, it's and if you walked in, it would be like, oh, this is a bar lounge and people are mingling and drinking, and it's like women who are all wearing like these slightly tight and short dresses, but it doesn't like look like a strip club. Like they would rent out venues of like, lounges or bars, or even sometimes, I feel like sometimes it was restaurants or something. But so anyways, that being said, like I when I went back to it, like I knew what it was. And I think, I don't know, my psychology was just like, I'm going to work. I'm going to make some, quick cash. And it's funny because it kind of feels like a sales job because you're just, I mean, I imagine people who have to call, for, I don't know, have jobs in sales where they constantly have to like talk to lots of people, and then most people just hang up on them. But then like sometimes, they're able to like have a conversation, and then the person buys whatever they're selling. Like it feels like that. I mean, the psychology of that is kind of, and I don't imagine it's, I think about people who are bartenders, like, women who are bartenders that are, people want to talk to them, and you're just like being yourself and you're serving the drinks. It's like, you're serving the dances.
Yeah. I get you. Well, I mean, sales and capitalism go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. They're like brother and sister or something, because everyone or a majority of people have to sell something, right? Whether you're selling an idea with a film or, as you were saying, as the bartender, right? You're selling, first of all, drinks, but it's also your personality, right? And being personable. And in a sales job, you can be selling a product, right? So, but I'm also wondering about the psychology of some of the people, like some of the things you observed about the psychology of the people that were your clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a wide range, just like there's a wide range of dancers. But I think, yeah, it's like oh my God, there's a great side note. There's a great artist called Jack the Stripper, like JAQ, who I follow on Instagram. And she makes these comics of basically her escapades, like stripping, and like, oh, I think it's so funny, and she captures it so well, of like different types of clients and like different like experiences and stuff. But there's this one, it's a joke where it's like 5 different guys sitting, and the strippers are all sitting on their laps, and they all share the same word bubble, all the men, and it's like, I'm not like the other guys here.
Well, you know what's funny about that is, so like I'm just gonna talk about this film because I watched it the other day, and have you seen this film Election?
No, I know of it though.
I think you might like it, but Reese Witherspoon is the main character, and I bring this movie up first of all because I watched it again recently, but second of all, it's very clear that every person is the hero of their own story, right? And so they will continually, like most of the characters, like like 90% of the characters, except there's one character that's just this kind of like innocent wallflower. He's like he's the high school like football quarterback, but he's just like just like a innocent little child in a lot of ways, which is kind of endearing. But but everyone is a hero in their own story, in the sense where they're doing these kind of terrible things, but they're continually justifying them. And so it's interesting that you bring that up, because it's like that saying, like, I'm not like the other guys in here. It's funny because it's like that alleviates the judgment that someone has upon themselves.
Right. Yeah.
But then it's also placing judgment on everyone else. Right.
Right.
So it's just funny, I think, how, people can continually talk themselves. Like, I mean, people get, I don't know if you've ever seen or been curious of like watching interviews with serial killers, right? And not all serial killers, but there's some that are just like, oh yeah, I did it and I was justified, and like this is why I did it, and whatever, right? And so I don't know, it's just an interesting observation of human psychology.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is like, some guys want to just be entertained and have a hot woman dance on them, but I think what a lot of people are paying for is this intimacy and this attention, and it's like someone is just fully focused on you, like everything you say is funny, like they're interested in you, and like that's kind of, it's not necessarily something you get in your everyday to be like, oh, like this, I feel great, like this person thinks I'm so like, like, I mean, it's like on some level it's like, yeah, like I would think that. But then I wonder too, I'm like, if I went to a strip club and there's like a hot woman and I'm like telling her about my life, like, I'm this filmmaker, and like she's like, oh my God, that's so interesting, like you're so like smart and artistic, and she's hot, and she's like, has her arm around me, I would probably be like, yeah, she really does like me a little bit, but so there's like that psychology, but it's like, yeah, she probably is just collecting her $20 a song though, and is going to go home to her boyfriend at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's somewhere in between, like, I don't know, but I think mostly it's like it's a service that can be very convincing.
Yeah, but it's interesting. So let's go a little deeper into that too. So in terms of just the patriarchy, right? I think, you and I were talking on the phone the other day, and I can say this from just my experiences as being like a cis male, that I think a lot of men in our society are used to being catered to in a lot of ways. And I don't, I generally like to like not make gendered sort of like statements necessarily, but I think as an in general thing, a lot of women in our society that grow up in a nuclear family household observe that their mothers are more subservient in certain ways, or have been trained through this patriarchal lens to be that way. Do you, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely part of like the culture we live in, and women are sort of conditioned to be more it's like it seems easy to just be like, oh, okay, like let me slip into this role, when I was dancing, like oh yeah, like go into the mode where you're like making this man feel really great about himself. Like I know how to do that, like like but what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I think some other Instagram thing I follow, I think, posted like the reason that people are so upset about sex work and mad at sex workers is because in our society, women are actually just supposed to do this stuff for free. And so it's it's maddening that some women are like charging and like making a profit on it when it's like, oh, you're supposed to just be sexy and nice and smile all the time and make people feel good, like already. So why are we mad when people are capitalizing off of that?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I also like I'm like, I wish there is like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I would go to a queer lesbian strip club though, and like buy lap dances and have a good time. Like when I have enough money to throw around one day, like, you know, like I think if it is also fine to celebrate, sexiness and performance and bodies and like that stuff. Like I wish that and I'm sure it exists somewhere, but like I wish, you know, I would, if that existed in like a queer context, like I mean I would happily go and like have a birthday there or whatever, like you know.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean I think that's good to state too. Yeah, because you know, I mean, the objective, like I was stating in the beginning, is to destigmatize, you know, this. And but I think that, you know, this patriarchal lens exists, and it's getting broken down, you know, through our generation and through a younger generation. And I mean, no one can predict the future, but you know, something that's interesting is there's this book called 2030. And in that book, it states that a majority of the wealth in the world will be controlled by women by 2030.
Oh, whoa, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I don't know what, I mean, you know, I can't predict the future, but
that's hard for me to believe for some reason, but that's like, it's like I'm like interesting and also skeptical, but I mean that's because I'm like, that's not that. Did you say 2030? That's
2030. Like, well, I mean, if you think about it like this, like, okay, so that's 8 years from now, right? And 8 years ago was 2014, and the amount of technological advances that have occurred since then, even within the last 8 years, or, you know, let's just say 2010, right? And so the information is more readily available. There's a lot of these breaking of the patriarchal sort of, I mean, you know, there's reasons why Trump exists, right? Because like a lot of white people are getting, especially white men, are becoming to freak out and get power.
They're like, oh no, are we still relevant? Like,
are we still relevant? Are we still relevant? I'm gonna make a TikTok. No, it's true. No, it's true. It's true though. I mean, but I don't know. It's just interesting. Like, you know, I know we're just kind of not necessarily trying to figure anything out, but just having a conversation openly about these structures that exist within our culture, you know? And I don't know, I find that sort of conversation to be more fruitful in certain ways, although it can be very confusing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think there should be more, especially like in the film industry, like film like is such a powerful media, and it's like, you know, I haven't worked extensively in like the film industry at large yet, but I feel like I'm on the brink, and it's like, you know, like my set was like mostly Black and brown and queer folks, and people were like, oh, like this is rare, like it's a rare treat and it feels so special. And I'm like, well, damn, like why is this fucking rare? And it's like, there need to be more like people of color in positions of power, and women and women of color and queer folks, and like,
yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's like there's like so I don't know, so much progress to be made still. yeah, and like even when you said it's like, okay, women are gonna have the majority of wealth in 2030, it's like, okay, but then is it still like all white women? Like is there still like a racial wealth gap? Like, so yeah, I think it's so complex in the ways that we need to like keep advancing and like challenging the systems, and yet it seems progress is not linear, it's like very, I don't know, forward and back and like, I don't know. But
no, I really enjoyed watching your film, and I think well, is there any advice actually that you'd like to give to is there any advice that you'd give to your younger self, and is there any advice that you want to give to other artists out there?
Maybe I'll do the other artists first, because I'm like, that is probably easier.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say kind of like what I was saying before, like, well, first of all, just like know that it's worth telling your own story, and especially if you come from any background or experience that has not been reflected so much, like it's I don't know, it's important to share your story, and you don't have to have a major in film and like do all this stuff. Like, I think as long as you have a story that you're telling from your heart, and it's I don't know, like a true experience, and you can allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable, like I think that there's a lot of power in that, and I think that people do want to hear it. And like there's so many programs now to in like the last few years that I don't know, that submit a short script or like make a 1-minute thing on your iPhone. Like I know Sundance has, I think it's like an 18 to 25-year-old like 1-minute film competition. Like I would just say, like, if you're interested in film, like believe in yourself, like check out all the things to apply to. And then let's see, advice for my younger self. Oh my goodness. I don't know. I don't know. It's like, I feel like, part of like the human psychology is you tell yourself like, oh, like, I'm where I'm supposed to be, and that was my journey, and all these steps that I took led me here. And so it's, I don't know. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, you're going to flip it on me?
Yeah, I'm curious.
What advice would I give to my younger self?
It's a hard question.
Don't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh my God, why not?
Because I got the most injured that way.
I
got
see.
the most injuries, and I suffer from them now. That's one advice. Another thing that's like more related to this podcast. Let's see. It'll all work out as it should. I guess.
Maybe a good one is like, it's okay to be scared. Don't let that stop you. I feel like that's a good one. Because I feel like, things, it's like always going to be scary, right? Like putting yourself out there, being an artist, like there's a certain element of risk with like, okay, I'm going to make this thing. It's very personal. It's like me pouring myself into it. And then part of like the being an artist part is like, you have to put it out there, and then, everyone's going to have different opinions, and some people might not like it, and hopefully like some people do like it, and people get it, and it like has an impact on people and challenges people and whatever. But anyways, that whole process is, I find, can be terrifying. But I think if you can learn to move forward like with the fear, and despite it a little bit, like I'm not gonna, I don't know, does it go away? Like I'm not sure. Like,
yeah, I think that I don't know if that necessarily, I mean, it's different for everyone, right? But I guess it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I think the people who are able to create a lot and create a sustainable career from, creating, like are able to somehow just not let that stop them, this fear of,
I think that most people have that sort of fear, but well, my recent interview with Chantal Martin, like I really like her perspective, because she talks a lot about these questions that she has with herself and how those questions she actually utilizes within her work and basically reverses the mirror towards the audience by asking those questions of the audience, right? The same ones that she asked of her. And so it's not, the way that I internalize that is, it's not that she doesn't feel these things. It's that she's able to transform that perspective of doubt into something that she can create with, right? And so instead of shelling up, it's more expansive in the sense that she can express, and she has that medium to be able to, or she allows herself to have those mediums.
Yeah. I love that. Like, because I think that's how, or that's like a good way to like seed a film idea too, is to kind of, or for me at least, it's like, what is a question that you have about yourself or your experiences or something that you like don't quite understand the answer to, and so like your answer is this like process of like trying to like even understand yourself better, and like I don't know, and it's like with film, what I love about that medium is you're able to hopefully let someone kind of see this experience that would be harder to explain in words, or like you're using like visuals and audio, and it's like just this, I don't know, like you can feel it, and it might be like harder to talk about. But I really liked what you were saying, like in the beginning, about how the characters, kind of going back to this old version of herself as she's starting this new chapter, kind of like not because she wants to, but because like she's going through this like horrible breakup, and she, her instinct is to like go back to who she was before. So I'm happy that you kind of clocked that, because that's definitely yeah.
Well, it's a very relatable thing to, in moments of uncertainty, going back to things that are more certain. That's why recalling. Yeah, and that's why, like, recalling past memories. I mean, there's a certain certainty in the past because it already occurred. And I was listening to this podcast on the podcast called Throughline about nostalgia, and I'll put it in the show notes for everyone and for you to check out. It's it was interesting. It was interesting because I guess in the 1600s, nostalgia was actually diagnosed as a disease.
Oh my God, I've had that disease.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I can be very nostalgic too. Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah.
And so they were saying like what? Like it's this, like what were they saying was the disease?
Well, it was reported. So, they were going through past documents from the 1600s, and it was saying that nostalgia, that soldiers were dying from nostalgia, and who knows if that was actually true or not. But it basically went through the history of the term nostalgia and how that's transformed today. From they use music as they were talking about. One of the reporters was talking about this Daft Punk song that he puts in his. He has like a, what's it called? Just like a regular cassette tape player. And listens to it, and how it's like constantly degrading over time. But those feelings of listening to that song transport him back to those moments when he was a child and what those things meant to him. And I think that's actually a lot of good storytelling comes from those feelings, whether it's, in a dystopic future world or whether it's, wherever it may be the setting, right? But being able to put those feelings into these settings and being able to relate them, which relates back to the whole idea of nostalgia. Yeah. But anyways, no, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you, taking the time, and I enjoyed your film, and I'll put the trailer in the show notes because it's not out, right? It's not out yet.
Yeah, like it's because it's playing the festival circuit right now. That's right. So they kind of don't like you to like have it on the internet while it's doing festivals, but hopefully it'll, get distributed after or something. I have a feeling it will be playing in LA if anyone is interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Where can people find you if they want to find you and your work?
The only social media I'm really using these days is Instagram, and mine is AMAXEY 422, Maxey 422. And then it's just like my website has a lot of my work on it and my email and stuff. But yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, sounds good.
Thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. All right. Bye. Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. YouTube and creative support is by Tyler Scully. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you next time.